From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! We're broadcasting on this last day of the 19th International AIDS Conference.
My case, my history is proof and concept that HIV can be cured. Hope is alive and cure is on the horizon.
The Berlin patient, Timothy Ray Brown, the first person believed to be completely cured of the AIDS virus. In 2007, a German doctor devised an experimental treatment to rid his body of HIV and leukemia. The plan worked, inspiring researchers across the globe looking for a cure for AIDS. We'll also speak with leading AIDS researcher, Cornell Weill's Dr. Jeffrey Lawrence, and with Stephen Lewis, the former UN Secretary General Special Envoy for HIV/AIDS in Africa, now co-director of AIDS-Free World. And we'll be joined by the Reverend Canon Gideon Byamigishu of Uganda, the first African religious leader to openly declare his HIV-positive status.
The repercussions of knowing that you are positive when you know that people are going to disown you, they are going to shame you, they are going to discriminate against you, and so forth. So people shy away.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Syrian government forces are continuing their bombardment of the city of Aleppo ahead of a widely expected all-out assault to uproot rebel fighters. Hundreds of troops are said to have massed on the city's outskirts as Syrian gunships pound several neighborhoods. Rebel forces, meanwhile, have launched attacks on army checkpoints around the city. A number of people were reported dead in clashes Thursday, but the exact amount is impossible to verify. In Washington, State Department spokesperson Victoria Nuland said the U.S. fears a new massacre in Aleppo will occur.
This is the concern, that we will see a massacre in Aleppo, and that's what the regime appears to be lining up for. Aleppo has again, as you said, been bombarded by Syrian fighter jets in the latest desperate effort of the Assad regime to hold on to control, and there are credible reports of columns of tanks prepared to attack the city.
A new study is warning intense summer thunderstorms are posing a major threat to the ozone layer. Scientists at Harvard University found strong thunderstorms are sending water deep into the stratosphere, setting off ozone-depleting reactions with chemicals that remain from the now-banned cooling gases known as CFCs. The study warns the ozone layer could suffer more damage should global warming unleash ongoing intense storms. Ozone is key to survival on Earth, protecting people, animal, and crops from the ultraviolet rays of the sun. The study is said to be one of the first to draw a deep link between ozone loss and climate change. On Thursday, a fierce storm tore through areas of the Northeast, knocking out power to more than 200,000 homes and businesses. World countries face a deadline today to finalize the text of a treaty that would mark the first-ever global agreement regulating the arms trade. On Thursday, hopes were raised that a deal is near after a new draft was leaked, closing a number of loopholes. But the outcome of the talks remains as uncertain as countries, including the U.S., have demanded a number of exemptions. The United States is by far the world's largest producer, importer, and exporter of armaments. Opponents, including the U.S.-based National Rifle Association, have lobbied against the treaty, and a bipartisan group of 51 senators has signed on to a pledge vowing to oppose it should it usher in tough regulation. In a protest outside the United Nations in New York, activists set up a mock graveyard to symbolize the victims of gun violence worldwide.
One person every minute is killed by arms. I've met lots of the families of people who have suffered that terrible loss. As you can see behind us, thousands of people die every day. This is a reality that could be changed.
A treaty that doesn't include all conventional weapons and all ammunition is, to me, will just be pointless. At the moment, you've got kind of unscrupulous governments that are willing to sell arms to any nation, not really caring about how they're going to be, going to be used.
One of the 12 slain shooting victims in last week's Aurora massacre was laid to rest Thursday at a public funeral. An unidentified friend remembered Michaela Medic, a community college student who was 23 years old when she was shot dead.
I've known Michaela since I was 11. We grew up together, made some of the most amazing memories that I will never forget and I will always cherish. Oftentimes during the summers, we spent weeks at each other's houses, just back and forth, back and forth. I would just show up, and she was there with open arms, waiting for me.
The University of Colorado, meanwhile, has denied a report that a package sent by shooting suspect James Holmes detailing plans for the massacre sat unopened in a campus mailroom before the shooting occurred. The school says the package was received the Monday after the attack and promptly reported to police. In Mexico, thousands of protesters have blocked the headquarters of the country's leading television network, Televisa, to accuse it of biased coverage in the recent presidential elections. Pre-candidate Enrique Peña Nieto defeated Andrés Manuel López Obrador earlier this month in a vote critics say was marred by fraud and tainted media coverage in favor of Peña Nieto's campaign. López Obrador has challenged the election results in court. Televisa has even been accused of receiving payments from Peña Nieto's supporters to skew its coverage. On Thursday, a massive crowd gathered outside the network studio chanting, quote, "Tell the truth." Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney is drawing controversy in Britain, the first stop of his three-nation tour abroad. Britons heavily criticized Romney Thursday after he questioned their country's preparedness to host the Olympic Games. Romney was speaking to NBC's Brian Williams.
There are a few things that were disconcerting. The stories about the private security firm not having enough people, the supposed strike of the immigration and customs officials, that obviously is not something which is encouraging, because in the games, there are three parts that make games successful. Number one, of course, are the athletes. That's what overwhelmingly the games are about. Number two are the volunteers, and they'll have great volunteers here. But number three are the people of the country. Do they come together and celebrate the Olympic moment? And that's something which we only find out once the games actually begin.
Other Romney gaffes in Britain have included publicly disclosing a meeting with the head of the secretive British intelligence agency, the MI6, and calling British Labour Party opposition leader Ed Miliband Mr. Leader. In response to Romney's comments on the Olympics, British Prime Minister David Cameron said his country has adequately prepared for its host duties.
Well, look, we are holding an Olympic Games in one of the busiest, most active, bustling cities anywhere in the world. I mean, of course, it's easier if you hold an Olympic Games in the middle of nowhere.
The Olympic Games opening ceremonies are being held today. On Thursday, victims of the Bhopal gas tragedy took part in a special Olympics in India to protest the chemical giant Dow Chemical's sponsorship of the London event. On December 3rd, 1984, around 40 metric tons of toxic gases leaked from a Union Carbide plant in Bhopal. The Indian government said soon afterward that around 3,500 people died, but campaigners estimate the total number of dead due to the leakage at 25,000, with many people still suffering. Years after the leak, Dow Chemical bought Union Carbide. An organizer of the Bhopal Special Olympics called Dow's involvement with the London Olympics an outrage.
Children who have been poisoned by Union Carbide and Dow Chemical are taking part in an event called Bhopal Special Olympics. It's a day before the opening ceremony of the London Olympics Games, to tell David Cameron and to Sebastian Coe that Dow Chemical needs to be kicked out of the Olympic Games, and also to the International Olympic Committee, who have signed a 10-year contract with Dow Chemical till 2020. We are doing our own games to tell them that their sponsorship will not be tolerated.
The longest ever Palestinian hunger striker has ended his fast after 103 days in exchange for Israel's pledge to release him 5 months early. Akram Rakawi, who reportedly suffers from asthma and diabetes, began his hunger strike in mid-April to demand his release on medical grounds. He had been sentenced to 9 years for transporting suicide bombers and was due to be released next June, but he will now be freed in January. The Israeli government, meanwhile, has asked its Supreme Court to approve the destruction of 8 Palestinian Palestinian hamlets in the South Hebron Hills so the Israeli military can use the area for training. The shepherds who live in the area were previously forced to evacuate by Israel, but were later returned to their homes by a court order. Palestinian advocates say the move is part of a larger push to oust Palestinians from certain parts of the West Bank. Back in the United States, experts are predicting a significant jump in the nation's official poverty rate ahead of census figures this fall. The Associated Press reports the poverty rate will likely increase from 15.1% to 15.7%, its highest level in half a century. The estimate translates to a figure of 47 million, or 1 in 6 Americans, living below the poverty line. The former CEO of the banking giant Citigroup is drawing headlines for publicly calling for the breaking up of the nation's largest banks and for restoring the separation of commercial and investment banking. Sandy Weil made the comments in an interview with CNBC.
What we should probably do is go and split up investment banking from banking, have banks be deposit takers, have banks make commercial loans and real estate loans, have banks do something that's not going to risk the taxpayer dollars, that's not going to be too big to fail.
That's a pretty radical idea, though, the idea of breaking up the investment banks and the banks. Are you suggesting going back and really breaking these companies up?
That's exactly what I'm suggesting. So I want to see the United States be the leader. I mean, I really believe in our country, and we're not going to be a leader if we keep on trashing our institutions.
Video footage has emerged of a New York City police officer roughing up a young man after stopping and searching him on a subway platform. In the footage, the officer accosts the young man before slamming him to the ground. He then throws him to the ground again just moments later. Activists say the video demonstrates the targeting of people of color under the New York Police Department's controversial policy of stop and frisk. And an audio tape has been released of the 9/11 emergency call that uncovered the New York City Police Department's secret spying on Muslim neighborhoods inside New Jersey. The Associated Press revealed last year New York Police Department agents photographed every mosque in Newark and eavesdropped inside Muslim businesses as part of a wider anti-Muslim spying program across the Northeast. On the tape from June 2009, a building superintendent told a 911 dispatcher he discovered a suspicious apartment as part of a routine check.
Came across an apartment where there's some suspicious activity. You know, suspicious in the sense that the apartment has no furniture except 2 beds, has no clothing, has New York City Police Department radios. There's computers in there. There's computer hardware, software, you know, just laying around. There's pictures of terrorists. There's pictures of our neighboring buildings that they have.
In New Brunswick?
Yes.
The phone call led the NYPD to admit to the FBI and New Jersey police that the spying operation was taking place. The tape was finally released after the NYPD fought to block its disclosure. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.